advancing the Sustainable Development Goals at Georgia Tech, launching a framework for organizational transformation to unite sustainability efforts across research, teaching, operations, and partnerships. To advance the Institute's new mission and strategic plan, President Ángel Cabrera urged leaders and units throughout campus with spearheading a project to promote, implement, and advance the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals at Georgia Tech. This project began in early spring 2020 and has continued to gain momentum through the events of the recent months as cultural, social, and environmental sustainability has become ever more important in the light of a global pandemic, increasingly evident effects of the climate crisis, and the ongoing fight for racial justice and equity. Today's campus kickoff event officially launches the initiative. Programming during the fall semester will introduce the campus community to the Sustainable Development Goals and articulate the role that Georgia Tech can play as a place-based, globally connected anchor institution to lead the Atlanta region in implementing and advancing the SDGs. Everyone is invited, students, staff, faculty, alums, partners, to join in this transformative project of innovation and organizational change. You're invited to peruse the website at president.gautech.edu/SDG. It's also in the chat. To learn more, reach out to organizing committee members and become involved. Pulling off an effort like this is no small deal. Please join me in thanking all the members of the Fall 2020 SDG Planning Committee at Georgia Tech, as well as the Institute Sustainability Task Force staff and members of the President's Office, and of course, President Ángel Cabrera. You will find their names and contact info on that website. So let's move to today's events. Panelists in today's speaker lineup have been asked to consider how the SDGs can be a useful framework for large organizations such as Georgia Tech to catalyze action and positive change that advances the public good. We encourage you to use the Q&A function or the chat function to pose questions to the panelists and share your thoughts and reflections. So introductory remarks today will be given by Georgia Tech President Ángel Cabrera, who joined Georgia Tech as its 12th president in September 2019. He is a Georgia Tech alumnus, and his roles as a business educator, as business educator, he has played a key role in advancing professional ethics, internationalization, and corporate social responsibility. Deeply invested in the positive future of the region, President Cabrera serves on such boards as the Atlanta Committee for Progress and the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. Our distinguished group of panelists, and you can read more about them again at the website president.gautech.edu/SDG, include John MacArthur of the Brookings Institution, a key leader in promoting SDGs roles for higher education, Wendy Purcell of Harvard Chan School of Public Health and former president of UK's University of Plymouth, Sarah Lee Shellberg, head of US iShare Sustainability EFTs at BlackRock, Nataki Osborne-Jelks, professor with Spelman College and co-founder of the Atlanta Watershed Alliance, and Isabella Steps, Georgia Tech environmental engineering student and a co-lead of the RCE Greater Atlanta Youth Network. To finish off the panel today, Joy Harris of Georgia Tech School of Electrical and Computer Engineering will give concluding remarks and present us with our upcoming call to action. With that, please join me in welcoming President Cabrera for introductory remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anna, for that introduction, and thanks to all the panelists for joining us today, for being part of this incredibly exciting thinking process that will set up an ambitious agenda for action. I'm really excited about today. When I joined or came back to Georgia Tech last year, what I was most excited about was this deep conviction that it is in places like Georgia Tech where there is hope to find solution to the most important problems of our time. And both because it is in places like Georgia Tech where the minds and the talents of young people and future leaders of change are formed, but also because of the very direct contributions that our faculty and our research centers make to finding answers to very complex problems. So one of the first things that I did soon after I arrived was to invite the broader community, faculty, staff, students, but also alumni and leaders from our community to come together in a process to build a new strategic plan, to basically lay out what are our collective dreams for the next decade. And we started off asking the most profound questions, which is what is it that we do? Why do we exist? What is it? What is the ultimate reason, the purpose, that gets us up in the morning and that keeps us going forward, that binds us as a community? And out of those the questions, it came a very important part of that process was to produce a mission statement, to just try to summarize, to distill in one sentence what it is that we do as a community. And we spent a lot of time working on this one sentence and discussing, and Anna was part of the process, and several of you were there as well, discussing prepositions and articles and nouns, and every single word in that sentence was carefully chosen. And the final sentence is, we develop leaders who advance technology and improve the human condition. Clearly, we are an educational institution, and ultimately it is developing people's talents that is the number one thing we do. We are a technological university and proud of it, proud of the science, of the technology, of the innovation that happens in this place. But ultimately, we don't believe in technology just for technology's sake. We are committed to making a difference to improve the human condition. I find that short sentence incredibly inspiring, and I've been reflecting on it ever since it became officially our mission statement a few months ago. But of course, it raises lots of questions, which is what a mission statement ought to do, right? Is to force us to think about what it is we do and we want to do, and especially that last part of improving the human condition, and because it begs the question of exactly what is it that we ought to do? What are those big questions? What are the big issues that should drive our attention if we're committed to improving the human condition? And fortunately, a lot of people around the world have spent time trying to answer that question, and that is the source of the Sustainable Development Goals. It is an answer to the question of what aspects of the human condition need improving. What are the top priorities that we should be embracing as the world? So it makes total sense to me that we would start there. That we would just carefully look at the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals as an articulating framework that can guide our actions as a university. I was somewhat involved in the earlier global development framework, the Millennium Development Goals, and somewhat frustrated that academic institutions were really not at the table at the time. Faculty members were, individual faculty members, but institutionally, academic institutions were not. I participated in creating what is called the Principles for Responsible Management Education within the UN Global Compact. And that framework is now has been adopted by hundreds and hundreds of business schools around the world. And I saw the impact that some of these global frameworks can have in shaping the behavior, the conduct of academic institutions, in that case of business schools, which is the space where I worked at the time. So I've seen it happen, and I think it ought to happen again within the current framework of global development, the Sustainable Development Goals, and that's what we've been trying to do. We have been partnering with other organizations, of course, with Brookings, and I'm delighted that my friend John MacArthur is with us today, with the Rockefeller Foundation. Thanks to them, we have worked in figuring out how to create a coalition of universities to band together and to exchange best practices and to support one another. And that is the University Global Coalition. that we've been shaping during this year. Clearly, the problems, the issues, the challenges that we face as a species, as a planet, are too big for any of us to be able to make a difference by ourselves. And that's why we have to reach out. We have to collaborate with others, and that's why it's important that we have these guests with us today to help us shape our thinking, and that's why we will continue to work in establishing those partnerships of collaboration with others. So I'm excited for two reasons about using and how in this sort of strategic planning process, the notion of embracing our responsibility to making an impact in the big problems that matter. I'm delighted that has come out so strong in this strategic planning process. And I encourage us to think about this in two directions, right? One is, how can the SDGs help us organize ourselves more effectively at Georgia Tech? How can we maybe be inspired by this framework to focus our energies in the things that really matter? And then in the opposite direction is really, how can we think about how we're going to have the biggest impact that we can as a community, and think about how both on the education side and how we can shape curriculum and we can shape what happens inside and outside of the classroom, but also how we can shape our multidisciplinary research efforts to really provide a voice of science. Of course, we were doing this whole reflection and analysis, and we came together as a community on this strategic planning process before COVID hit, and before the issues around racial inequality really became such a central issue in our nation. And I think both of those issues, if anything, have highlighted and amplified, as Anna was mentioning earlier, the importance of what we're doing. We have seen how in dealing with our own challenges as an academic institution, science and technology have been the essential tools for us to deal with our own issues. We have seen how many of our faculty and the various disciplines and labs have turned their knowledge and expertise to provide assistance and solutions for others. We've also seen how COVID-19 has even exacerbated or made it even more obvious the issues of social inequality that we have around us. We have seen that these issues in the Sustainable Development Goals are not just problems of faraway places, but are realities in our very immediate community. And so, if anything, the very odd and difficult circumstances of 2020 have inspired me and energized me about the importance and the urgency of our mission of having an impact, and convince me that the SDGs could be just the framework that we need to do that. So look forward to the panel, Anna, and looking forward to the presentations from the other panelists. Thank you all for being part of this very important conversation.
I'm John MacArthur. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations to Ángel, my wonderful friend, and Anna, and all the wonderful leaders at Georgia Tech and in the community. I am an economist based at Brookings and also an advisor of the UN Foundation. I've been involved for many years, I guess, now with the Sustainable Development Goals and what was before that the Millennium Development Goals, and have really watched this extraordinary arc going from the original UN high-level conversations of how world leaders get together to what I would call the local, regional, pioneering conversations to where things actually get done. And it's been quite extraordinary to watch an extraordinary university like Georgia Tech get so much momentum around this. And there's a few things I thought I might be able to share in terms of how I see a lot of people worrying about the SDGs, and also thinking about how to make them just a little more tractable even still. So if I were to start with, how are people worrying about the SDGs? And we're seeing this especially today in the context of COVID and so many big crises that are going on around the world. Is the crisis bigger than the SDGs, and do we need to take a step back? Well, I would argue it's the opposite, actually. The SDGs are the call to come back to basics around basic issues of inclusion, prosperity for all, sustainability for all, and no one left behind. And so, if anything, this is a time to double down on those basics. And as a colleague of mine said, the crisis of COVID has brought a change in thinking that the SDGs were meant to help trigger all along to begin with. And so it's this change in thinking around basic issues for humanity and our long-term success as humanity interfacing successfully with nature. And I find that an important starting point because a lot of people, when they worry about the SDGs, or they wonder about the SDGs, or even when they're introduced to the SDGs, there are typically three basic concerns I hear people having. One is it's just too big, it's too much. Second is it's too far off. I've got an immediate set of concerns in front of me. And third is I'm not the UN. That's what people talk about out there. I don't go to New York. I don't go to the General Assembly. What does it mean for me? And it's in that context that I found that there are, three basic answers. And this is some work that we've been doing at Brookings and with the Rockefeller Foundation and many partners around the world to say, well, first of all, on this concern of it being too big, it's very important to, in my view, take stock of what these SDGs actually are. When I meet with groups around the world, if I ask 20 people, what's the single biggest issue in the world? What's the single biggest problem the world needs to solve? I'll generally get 20 different answers. I might actually get everything ranging from inequality to climate change, education to protecting the environment. Even people forget in those 20. Often, for example, people don't answer the oceans. Doesn't come up. And then I say, well, does that mean we shouldn't protect the oceans for the next generation because it's not too important? It's only 70% of the planet. And then people all laugh and they say, well, of course we should protect the oceans. And I say, well, that's interesting because what you just described typically is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the 20 answers all fit into these goals. But we might have forgotten one in the room, which is Goal 14 on protecting the oceans. And the way to understand the goals, in my view, is that it's not what the UN told the world to care about. It's what the world told the UN not to forget about. And what it is a way to bring together all of these concerns that people have, which are all correct. And so these goals are ultimately a way not to ask everyone to do everything, but to bring together all the issues that we already care about. And in universities, each department, each school, each student, each professor, each stakeholder already cares about at least one of those issues as their most important. And this is a way to bring our interests together. But then that second concern is usually that they're too far off. It's just too big an issue. And so we said, well, why don't we think about not just what needs to be done, say, by 2030, why don't we think about what could be done in the next 12 to 18 months to bend the curve? If life, if forgive the sports metaphor, were a football game, don't tell me what the touchdown is, tell me what the first down is. And so how do we think about how to move the ball forward? And there's a million to do that. There's no single way. And that's how we actually make progress over time, is thinking about the next 12 to 18 months at a time. And then third is, how do we think about not just what the UN needs to do? Ultimately, if this is about people reminding the UN what to play back to ourselves to pay attention to, this is about what each of us do in our communities and how we can cooperate. How can we come together to think about things we could do 12 to 18 months at a time on a generational basis to make change? And so what we did is we bundled that together in an exercise we call not 17 goals, but 17 rooms. Because ultimately, this comes down to people getting together in rooms to talk about what they can do together to make change. And for the past couple of years, we've been building this experiment of 17 rooms to say, how can we create new forms of problem solving that empower people in their communities, in their universities, in their businesses, in their organizations to cooperate, and make change. And we've been very privileged that Ángel Cabrera has been part of that. And he's been leading what we call the Goal 17 Partnership Room, but partnerships through universities as hubs of societal partnership. And so we're delighted, and I'm delighted as an economist who spent a lot of my career in and out of academia, to think about how universities can play a central role in this long-term agenda. And there are three basic reasons why I love universities. One is it's about science in the face of the moment. It's about evidence and inquiry that can persist beyond the politics of the day. And universities play a central role in society for prompting hard questions, for self-reflection as society. A second is that they're hubs of intergenerational collaboration. The problems that we're talking about need the wisdom of people who have been around for a while and the fresh perspective of the new generation that are going to lead the change. It needs collaboration between all of the above. And third, when universities work well, they're tied to the ground realities of the problems in their regions and the stakeholders where they live. And so this is why I'm so excited by what you're all doing here in tackling on not just what the university can do, but what the stakeholders can do together to tackle the problems where everyone lives in the Southeast. And in that spirit, we've been talking about how 17 rooms can be a concept, and even 17 rooms U. This year, we're about to have our annual global policy flagship, which has taken on a spirit, of course, of 17 Zooms. But we're also seeing that universities around the world, several are wanting to say, how can we do this to bring together our communities for a common language, a common framework, to get everyone on the same page, literally and figuratively. And I understand that the team on the ground there has been leading an effort for next month. And we want to be as helpful as possible to you as you pioneer this and build on experiences from Mexico and Canada and Spain and other institutions. And we're so thrilled, again, that Ángel, with the president of actually McGill University, is co-chairing the global flagship conversation on universities can help in New York in a couple of weeks, based out of New York in the UN conversation while we're all on Zoom globally. But together, to see how we can support you to be a pioneer of how universities and communities can come together to create change, to make it practical, near-term, and cooperation-based for these SDGs to be meaningful in people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John. Hello, I'm Wendy Purcell. I'm a former university president, and I'm now a research scholar over at Harvard University. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this exciting event. The first thing I want to say is that higher education matters. What we do here matters. And I think never more than now as we battle the pandemics of COVID and inequity in our society. In these times of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, so-called VUCA conditions, the SDGs can be a beacon to help guide our collective efforts. So with 17 goals and 169 targets, I don't want to get lost in the detail, rather what the SDGs represent, the nearest thing we have to a strategy for the world, a world where no one is left behind. Their importance to me is the hyper-dependent and interconnected nature of sustainable development, where the economy and society are nested into the biosphere. We can't have a thriving economy with prosperity for all, or a thriving society based on equity, if we're on a dead planet. So looking at the SDGs and the university's mission, the key thing for me is to focus on what we do here: teaching, learning, research, innovation, community service, and engagement. Rather than something we add on to an already hectic schedule for faculty, staff, and students, we need to use the SDGs as the lens through which we look at what we do here, not something more to do. So it's a bit like, for me, putting on my SDG goggles and looking afresh at our teaching and learning, looking again at the research and innovation, and looking anew at our community service. We need to integrate this higher purpose into the day job so it becomes very much part of the way we do things around here. We need to reframe sustainability and sustainable development as a strategic agenda for higher education. Now, universities are full of people who are excited by problems, who are seeking solutions, pushing back the boundaries of knowledge and nurturing the next generation of leaders and scholars. And the SDGs and addressing the SDGs is not something we impose on an academic community. Rather, it represents a call to action for faculty, students and staff, helping us reimagine our purpose and lead through uncertainty, driving academic excellence and impact, and helping sustain the institution in the face of disruption and global challenges. All well and good, you may say, but how? What does this look like? Can you tell me in this new agenda for the university, where am I in this? Let me turn to some practical examples, first to the academic domain. The development of programs and courses that bring together disciplines in novel ways to address the SDGs and equip our students with knowledge and learning and skills for the 21st century. The same is true for research problems, where the campus can be a living lab for societal inquiry. And when I talk of interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary efforts, this is not about dissolving so-called disciplinary silos. This is not anti-disciplines. It's about maintaining strong disciplinary communities who can then bring their unique perspectives around a problem. This agenda must be driven by intellectual curiosity. One scheme I wanted to mention is Community Research Awards, working with the local community here to invite their questions and connecting them with leading faculty who are interested in finding answers. This is a way of connecting local with global challenges. With respect to enabling the university to engage with the SDGs, there needs to be some sort of structural coordinating hub that can be a meeting place for scholars, students, and a wider group of stakeholders, particularly in the city and wider region. This agenda is about radical collaboration on a global scale, partnering with public, private, and plural organizations. And finally, the university needs to walk the talk, dealing with its carbon footprint, its impact investing, and its promotions criteria, and so on. This agenda needs to be baked into the culture and become, as I said, just the way we do things around here. This global agenda, but made personal. Thank you very much.
I am thrilled to be here with all of you, Georgia Tech, for the invitation to join this really important discussion. So what I'm going to do is provide some perspectives at more of the corporate level, private sector, and specifically around finance and investments. And what I'm going to do is really focus on three things. So the first is to talk about BlackRock and what sustainability means to us. Two, how are we supporting the SDGs? And then lastly, what are some of the things that we're doing to really inspire our employees to take action? So starting with BlackRock and how we think about sustainability. So it's really driven by our purpose. So BlackRock's purpose is to help more and more people experience financial well-being. So as a fiduciary, what we do is we really commit to providing investment excellence to focus on long-term sustainability. And this is embedded in everything that we do really holistically across all of our businesses. What this means is integrating environmental, social, and governance issues and practices into our overall investment processes, to creating also, positive social impact in the communities that we ultimately serve. So today, BlackRock manages $7 trillion in client assets, which means that more and more investors entrust us with their assets more than any other asset manager in the world. And with that comes really a deep sense of responsibility. So earlier this year, our CEO, Larry Fink, published a letter to CEOs. He's been doing this now for close to and in it, he stated that climate change is really a defining factor in companies' long-term prospects, and that we are on the edge of fundamental reshaping of finance. So the 2020 letter was really built upon the 2019 letter, which really centered on companies needing to really focus and be able to define and live their purpose. This year, our executive committee also, for the first time, published an open letter to all of our clients with some public commitments around how we're making sustainability our new standard. And it really involves three key initiatives. The first is building sustainable and resilient. The second is offering access to sustainable solutions for all investors. And then three, it's really about increasing and enhancing our stewardship efforts. And our commitments were really driven by our investment thesis and our belief that sustainable portfolios can actually help investors achieve more resilience and better risk-adjusted returns over the long term. And this global pandemic and certainly the focus on racial equality has really reinforced our conviction and our focus. And we've also seen increased momentum into sustainable solutions within the industry. And sustainability, of course, is also really central to BlackRock as a corporation. Just to provide some statistics, we hit 100% renewable energy this year. About 50% of our new hires last year female, and we were voted #1 in our sector for most diverse firm by Refinitiv, and also #1 by, as I should say, as one of the most just companies by Forbes and Just Capital. Let me shift to talk about how BlackRock is really supporting the SDGs, and we're doing it in a number of different ways. So first, SDGs is part of our investment stewardship effort. So our BlackRock's investment stewardship team engages with companies globally on material, environmental, social, and governance issues. Our engagement priorities really center on these ESG issues. For example, board quality, environmental risks and opportunities, as well as human capital management and a few others. And this year, what we began to do is we are mapping our engagement priorities to the SDGs, as many of the topics that we discuss with companies correspond or really intersect with the aspects of those SDGs in which the private sector really plays an important role. And then the second is around how we really support it through our research. So BlackRock has a dedicated sustainable investing function. And currently today they're developing an SDG investment framework, as well as tools to help with reporting, given the growing demand by our clients to be able to act. We do currently provide what we call impact reporting for some of our sustainable solutions, where investors today can see how their dollars are aligning with specific SDGs. And then finally, it's access to SDG investment solutions. So we really seek to provide access to companies that are really aligning to the SDGs. In fact, we offer 2 global impact solutions for all investors. In fact, one of the ETFs, the ticker symbol is actually SDG. And so, it's estimated that the SDGs have the potential to really unlock about $12 trillion in savings and revenue by 2030. So let me just share with you just a few examples of how BlackRock is inspiring employees to take action. So I would highlight two things. So the first is BlackRock support for networks. BlackRock has supported a number of employee networks for decades. I'm part of many of them. Some of these networks include, focus on women. We have a Black Professionals Network, Kinks, LGBTQ. We also have a green team, which is environmentally focused. And these networks really allow for employees to feel involved, to have a voice. And many of the leaders that champion these networks provide a number of different programs to help support employees based on their passions and interest. And then the second is focused on our philanthropy and our social impact. So BlackRock really, starts to focus on this engagement with our employees. So we have a robust match and give program, as well as providing, paid volunteer days. So, last year, BlackRock matched $7 million in employee donations. And, the second is around our overall philanthropy. Developed a BlackRock Gives Committee, where we provide, grants annually, globally to nonprofits really around the world that are really designed to serve the local communities. And in February, the firm made about $500 million charitable donation, where we established also the BlackRock Foundation. And the BlackRock Foundation is really designed to promote social and economic progress for more and more people around the world, with, I would say, a particular outsized focus on marginalized communities from racial and ethnic minorities, as well as women and displaced people or immigrants. And in March, we donated about $50 million to COVID-19 efforts and $10 million specifically to take action to support racial equity. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our Halleck Scholars Program. So this program, we are really humbled and thrilled that we have an opportunity to work with Georgia Tech to be able to identify a pool of candidates that socioeconomic backgrounds and identify these exemplary candidates that really show heart and innovation.
Thank you again for the opportunity to serve on this panel. There's been a lot that has been said that has resonated with me. Particularly many of Wendy's comments about letting SDGs be the lens that we use. She talked about the SDGs being sort of a strategic agenda for higher education, and higher education being sort of a living laboratory for societal inquiry. And so I think some of those comments will help to center some of what I'd like to talk about today, just very briefly. From my vantage point, as someone who works at another higher education institution, Spelman College, but also who has worked for a lot longer at the community level on building sustainable communities than I have been working in academia. And as I reflect upon how the SDGs can be a useful framework for large organizations like Georgia Tech to catalyze action and positive change that help to advance the public good, I think about it from this kind of community-based perspective, and to me it kind of boils down to three things: collaboration, meaningful partnerships, and authentic community engagement. And so just for a couple of minutes, what I'd like to do is to sort of illustrate this through my work on restoration of Proctor Creek. And Proctor Creek is a local watershed in the Atlanta area, very close to the Georgia Tech campus. Proctor Creek in 2013 was named as a part of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Urban Waters Federal Partnership. And so EPA says this about the Urban Waters Federal Partnership from their website. This partnership will connect urban communities, particularly those that are overburdened or economically distressed, with their waterways by improving coordination among federal agencies and collaborating with community-led revitalization efforts to improve our nation's water systems and promote their economic, environmental, and social benefits. And so just from that description, I think you can sort of understand how the SDGs cross in and out of projects like the Proctor Creek Urban Waters Federal Partnership Initiative. And so just to give you a little bit about Proctor Creek, it's a 9-mile creek that starts in downtown Atlanta and flows through Atlanta's west side. It's a place where kids used to play, where people fished and swam, and where people were actually baptized. Today, the creek is polluted with sewage from a combined sewer overflow system that are remnants of an age-old infrastructure that was brought to Atlanta in the late 1800s. Since that time, significant progress and development has gone everywhere in the city except for West, and that's changing today. For those of you at Georgia Tech, you know what I'm talking about. But until recently, there had not been a lot of investments, on the west side of the city. And for years, groups like the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, the organization that I co-founded, we've worked with fellow residents in the Proctor Creek watershed, sometimes kind of as this lone voice crying out in the wilderness. We had non-governmental organizations who came and went. Some brought in programs here or there when there was available funding. But when that trail of funding and resources, dried up, they took their efforts and activities to other places and to work on other issues. And community-based groups were left to sort of figure out the solutions, for themselves. Now we're in this kind of place and space where what was once a forgotten area of the city of Atlanta, is now the subject of intense focus from multiple government stakeholders, academic institutions, local and national nonprofits, as well as private developers, in addition to residents and community organizations that have invested decades of sweat equity and activism to try to revitalize this watershed. And as this federal partnership started to form in 2013, watershed residents really put it out there that they wanted to ensure that solutions that were being sought by government and by other organizations were driven by community needs, and that included authentic engagement and principles of collaborative problem solving. And so when I think about the role that higher education institutions have played in this work, I think about Georgia Tech and the very thoughtful approach from a lot of different vantage points. But what I'd like to maybe sort of lift up is the work of the Georgia Tech Center for Serve, Learn, Sustain. And I know I saw Jenny Hirsch and Rebecca Watts-Hull and some others who may be watching on today. But when I think about, sort of these collaborations, and I think about Georgia Tech as this locally connected, globally engaged institution, I think about kind of these basic principles of collaboration, of authentic community engagement, and how these principles also undergird the 17 SDGs. And when you have an academic institution that has, quality professors who have engaging in innovative research, curious students who are inspired and really motivated to get into the work and to think across disciplinary boundaries, it can create an opportunity for lots of synergies and for partnerships that, maybe sometimes very incrementally, but that steadily, move the communities toward seeking, the sustainable communities that they're trying to create. When I think about the partnership between SLS and various community entities and organizations, I think about support that we've seen with respect to community science or citizen science is what it's probably most commonly known as. When Georgia Tech professors have engaged with their students as well as community members to help us to uncover what's happening in terms of water quality in Proctor Creek. And there are lots of other, nonprofits who are involved in this work as well. But it's critical to be able to tap into and to engage the expertise of faculty as well as, again, the curiosity, of students as they're learning, as they're growing, as they're developing. And what we find is that students who may be in a class, in an ecology class, who are, taking water samples, of Proctor Creek, they're learning not only about what's currently impacting the creek, but there is this space for them to learn about the historical inequalities and inequities, and in some cases, here in the city of Atlanta, kind of the racialized politics that have led to things that we see happening today, like poor water quality in Proctor Creek and all of the other social ills that impact that community. So, this idea of, just to take Wendy's idea again, of this living laboratory for societal inquiry, it goes beyond just the traditional science and technology, but also spans into social issues. We've seen some great innovation, even from, English classes at Georgia Tech, who have taken on kind of some of these issues with respect to sustainable development. And I'll be honest, I had not seen that done quite the way that it's done in some of the classes here at Georgia Tech, where students, were taking on kind of English and communications, but using it, looking at it through, if I can take Wendy's point again, through the lens of the SDGs and through the lens of what's happening in local communities. I could talk on and on about this all day, and I know that my time is running out. But what I guess I'll just end in saying is that there is so much promise in these locally grounded partnerships. There's so much promise around, using, senior design projects and, lab projects in, architecture and civil and environmental engineering, and in courses across the discipline to help solve, kind of in real time, some of the challenges that communities are facing. And, from my vantage point, through working with and helping to build a community-based nonprofit organization, it's meant the world to us to be able to tap into that expertise. And we've been able to translate that expertise and these, what are seemingly these little student projects into real change happening on the ground.
With what we've heard, President Cabrera, would you want to share just a couple of initial reflections from what some of the panelists have volunteered today?
Well, I am I'm taking notes because I've been inspired by each one of them. I liked John's sort of 3 ways of university impact on the SDGs, because the first one he cited is the obvious one that we're all aware of, right? Using science, using sort of this being this neutral source of truth and analysis about what we need to know beyond politics. I think that is clear, but the other ones are very interesting. Notion of intergenerational collaboration, which is of course inherent to higher education, but I don't think we're not fully aware, but we don't address it intentionally. I think that's really a very interesting idea, and of course that connectedness, that embeddedness in the local community, which is very powerful. And of course that embeddedness in the local community became beautifully apparent with Nataki's work in our own backyard as a great example of how the idea of the SDGs can manifest itself in a powerful way locally. And I also liked very much Wendy's description of the SDGs as the sort of the strategy for the world, right? I mean, it's a very interesting way to put it. Like, we have this just like I would expect that our institute strategic plan will reflect itself in strategic plans in some of the colleges and units. I mean, it's very interesting to look at this as sort of that strategic framework for the world. Very powerful. And Sarah, I love the message that you sent, not just in terms of how BlackRock is sort of walking the talk, and how the more work you do in the space of sustainability, the more accountable you need to be with your own practices. But also, I think this message that sustainability and global sustainability is not at odds with good business and with returns. That in fact those can come hand in hand, and is also a powerful idea. So anyway, all I have is just a terrific sort of reflections on this, and I can wait for Isabella's comments to continue to help me fill my notebook this morning.
I am so happy to be here at this kickoff event. As a current student, it's definitely an honor to be on this panel with so many other sustainability professionals. And as a current Georgia Tech student, I'm very excited and impressed that President Cabrera and many departments on campus are making a renewed commitment to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's very important as a public institution in the Southeast. So really exciting what can come of that. I am by no means an SDG expert, so I'll talk a little more about my personal journey with sustainability as a student, and then why I think the SDGs can definitely be the transformational agent that our campus community can embrace. So growing up, sustainability wasn't really a word that I heard get tossed around very often. But then I came to college at Georgia Tech, and well, I learned a lot of things and started getting involved in sustainability on campus. I've had the opportunity to get involved with many student organizations that consider sustainability at the heart of their missions, such as Students Organizing for Sustainability and Engineers Without Borders, as well as many others. And I also started working at Serve Learn Sustain. I know some folks have already mentioned SLS, but SLS is a great department on campus that is truly like exemplifying what the SDGs are all about and the commitment that higher ed should make to sustainable development, because they are a department that incorporates sustainability education and service learning through in-class and extracurricular activities. So if you're a student at Tech and haven't gotten a chance to get involved with them, definitely check them out. It's definitely a great example of an innovative higher ed initiative since it's grounded locally and connected globally. And so the first time I was introduced to the SDGs actually was while I was on a study abroad program in Japan. I was immediately drawn to the SDGs as a framework for sustainable development. And I was also just really drawn to the aesthetic icon colors that the UN uses. As cliche as it is to say, while I was on the other side of the world, I started thinking more about the sustainable development challenges that my college city of Atlanta was experiencing. So when I came back to campus, I got more involved in local sustainability efforts. In particular, I've been really involved in RCE Greater Atlanta, which Nataki and many other people in the audience are a part of as well. It's a local sustainability network that has many different stakeholders from other institutions, business, nonprofits, and government. Being involved in RCE Greater Atlanta has been a really unique experience as a student that I hope will become more mainstream as the network continues to grow and it becomes more advertised on different campuses in the area. It has really allowed me to get off of the GT campus bubble and work with community partners and work with students from other campuses on different education action initiatives around the SDGs. So that's been a lot of fun. Many of my favorite memories have definitely been when me and fellow friends and students have volunteered with community partners like Plant Lana, or discussed some spicy sustainability topics over a civic dinner. Together, the RCE is working to build relationships and catalyze community assets to provide a sustainability network for the region. So I'm definitely excited to see where it goes and hope all of you guys check it out after this. Thus, I believe that the UN Sustainable Development Goals are a great comprehensive framework for connecting any initiative to an aspect of sustainability because it is scalable and linkable. Having a set of 17 goals helps bring a lot of clarity and connectedness to the many challenges we are facing, even though many of the goals are very high level, such as like no poverty and zero hunger. It's like, whoa, how will we ever achieve that? They may seem impossible to make progress on, but I am very confident that our generation can be the ones to make substantial progress on achieving sustainable development. In fact, I believe it is definitely our responsibility through personal lifestyle choices, or bigger like career choices such as or bigger like organized actions such as career paths, volunteerism, and voting to be contributing positively to sustainable development. A lot of our generation honestly has so much drive and passion, so I'm constantly impressed by the other work that my great friends and peers are doing in the field of sustainability. And for those who are kind of like looking for what role they can play in contributing to the SDGs, I really like how they are scalable and linkable. So I think it can really be related to any of your personal and career interests. Just for some super basic practical examples, if you're choosing to go meatless for a meal or have a vegetarian lifestyle, then you're definitely contributing to Goal 13, climate action. And then if you're thinking about going into a career in like water resources or like water conservation as an engineer or scientist, then you're definitely contributing to Goal 6, clean water and sanitation. So the SDGs, I really do believe, can be integrated into any major or field of study. as we're a great framework for higher ed. And as a GCT student, SLS has a lot of advice on like what courses you can line up with to connect with your major that incorporate sustainability, or just getting involved in like campus clubs or an Atlanta organization like RC Greater Atlanta can be great as well. So I'll end it with that, but I'm definitely happy to answer questions in the chat or later on about how you can get involved as a student with SDGs on the campus and in Atlanta. Thanks, guys.
The Q&A and the chat box is full of comments, questions, recommendations, and queries. So I want to give a shout out to the 8th grade scholars at Centennial Academy, a STEAM academy just very close to Georgia Tech. And there are some really great questions that are coming through from the students. And interestingly, some of those questions really relate very strongly to questions that are being asked by the campus community. And so perhaps one large one is how can we really integrate the SDGs into our everyday learning, whether we're in 8th grade or we're at Georgia Tech? And is there a way to think about the SDGs as an opportunity to break down silos, whether those silos are between the K-12 and higher ed community, or whether they are in terms of disciplines within a university, or whether they are between universities, community partners, and other partners. So really that question is one about how can we think about the SDGs to break down silos and barriers. And it's a huge question, but I'm going to invite Wendy and John and Nataki to give us just a couple of reflections on that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think most of our societal challenges, these big questions of our day, don't fit neatly into any individual discipline or university department. They are, by definition, multifaceted. And I think the really exciting opportunity here is to gather people from different disciplinary backgrounds, from a great diversity of viewpoints and cultures, and gather them round a problem as their shared purpose. And I think that nature of being connected through the purpose of seeking solutions is really what breaks down barriers. I think that's the kind of value add space. I think where I've seen institutions kind of miss out, in a sense, is to think, let's do the structural silo changing and spend all their time looking internally, as opposed to creating opportunities for collaboration around the problem and the solution finding. And in that process of co-creation and collaboration, that's really where the barriers, if there are such things, fall away as people connect very deeply around the purpose.
Thank you, Wendy. John, and then Nataki.
Well, I would just add, and with congratulations to Isabella, I feel like we'll all be working for you soon. So thanks for your leadership. I think I would have two answers. One is that there's at the kind of big picture problem solving side, there are these real questions around how do we connect the dots. So ultimately, the SDGs are a giant dot connecting exercise about how everything connects to everything. So if you care about food systems, Isabella mentioned food, or if you care about climate, or if you care about biodiversity, or if you care about water, or if you care about energy, all of those issues feed into each other because you need water to grow food. Where we grow our food affects our biodiversity. How we produce our food affects our climate. Where the energy comes from to grow and distribute the food affects all of the above. So we have to be thinking about how these pieces connect, and it's not my goal versus your goal. It's about, yes, I care about food, but there's another person who cares about energy and environment, and we need to be thinking about how those connect. And the goals, I would say, are a call to action to do so. The second thing, though, is I think, and this is an area where a place like the Georgia Tech community and all the partners who are on the line could play a huge role to say, how do we not just measure success at our personal level, but at an organizational level? What does it mean to be an SDG consistent university in our community? What does that mean we do internally for everything from gender equity to leave no one behind? we can start with very specific assessments of who's getting left behind, for what reasons, and in what places, and what can we do to address that. And there's a movement afoot to take these very big ideas of like voluntary national reviews. That's the global official process, how countries assess themselves. There's been a movement to voluntary local reviews, how cities can assess processes or what they're doing. Now we have some universities talking about, Carnegie Mellon has said they're going to do a voluntary university review. And they announced that they were going to do it before they'd figured out how to do it, because they said, we just need to do this. So I think a place like Georgia Tech and all the community partners could say, what's our scorecard for how we assess what good looks like, so everyone's measuring to the same thing on how we are being a successful SDG undertaking.
Thank you, John. A quick word from Nataki, please.
So if I can build up on something that John just said, when I think about kind of what success looks like, we have the individual 17 SDGs, but then when we think about sustainability and think about those 3 E's and how they can play out in terms of environment, the economy, and equity, how does that really play out, in our pursuit of achieving these 17 SDGs. Also, since we have some middle school students on the line, what the question really made me think about is this, the way that a lot of school systems are now kind of focused on this idea of problem-based learning. So we're not just teaching our students math, we're not just teaching science, but how can we present a problem to them that brings in these various disciplines? And also when I think about, some of the work that people are doing on climate change from this kind of multi-solving lens, we can address climate issues, but at the same time be addressing, issues around, poverty and economic, inequality in cities. We can be, addressing, some of the challenges with respect to, environmental injustice. And so we can look at these problems, at these challenges that we're up against as there are multiple approaches and multiple disciplines. And so with the same token, we can bring together these, various sustainable development goals and not look at things in silos, but, really craft solutions that address multiple of these SDGs.
Wonderful. I wish we had all day and many days to continue these specific conversations. And I want to thank our panelists and Sarah joining us from San Francisco. We'll hear more from you another time. Lots of questions, comments are coming through the chat. We're going to take those in and process them and hopefully be able to get back with you with responses. I want to turn the microphone and space over to Joy Harris.
I have learned so much from this panel today, and you all have also given us a great deal to think about. I thank all of the panelists. Thank you for your work, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. We have several ways for you to continue and to get involved. The first way is to add to our Sustainable Development Goal Asset Map, and the link is here at president.godtech.edu/SDG. This map lists assets that are connected to each of the sustainability development goals, and we would love for you to add more that connect us to ways that we can help advance the goals. And secondly, add to it, but also use it. Use the resources that are there that will help each person. If you are a faculty member, ask students to add to the map, but also apply some of the resources to their majors or to your classes. These are ways that we can both contribute and also receive and advancing these goals and the metrics that we're trying to accomplish. You can also attend the University Global Coalition Virtual Conference on 9/21, and I'll drop the link in the chat. It's a bit longer. And finally, students, please apply to participate in the virtual 17 Zooms event on 10/1. Again, the link is here at president.godtech.edu/SDG-student-engagement, because we want to continue this conversation and nail down even more actionable items that we can continue this work as we move forward. And thank you all so much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our attendees. This has been an amazing event.
So with that, thank you, panelists. Thank you, President Cabrera. Thank you, everyone on the organizing committee. And we're so thrilled to have this call to action and a way to continue being involved. Thank you, everyone.